So, can I start the session or we should wait for some more time?
We can start the session.
Good afternoon to everyone. So we are in module 9, last. So let's. I tried maximum not like make the session to finish within an hour. Let's see. So in the session, okay. So what are we going to see inside the module 9? In the module 9, we're going to look into the data processing for both quantitative and qualitative. And then data analysis on for quantitative, and then qualitative data analysis, qualitative analysis. And then we'll also look into the mixed method design. So how does the mixed method works? And then we'll also be looking into the validating and validation dissemination for the qualitative finding. Because for the quantitative finding, I think we had the earlier session modules, we have covered it. So we will be discussing about the qualitative findings, validation, and dissemination. So these are the things which we are going to look into the module 9. So without delaying, I'll start. So if before going for any analysis, the data processing is the main thing which we need to start doing. So then only we can get into the analysis. So for data quantitative data, the first thing will be the data entry, and for qualitative that will be the transcription. And then for both quantitative and qualitative, data quality check, that will be very important thing, and then the data cleaning. So these are the 4 key things for the data processing. So we'll discuss about the data entry in quantitative. Traditionally, we used to collect the data using a hard copy, either an interview schedule or a survey tool, and that will be entered in an electronic format, either in an Excel or any software, whichever we are using for analyzing the data. But if you see the last like some more than 4 to 5 years, now we started using the electronic data entry itself. So directly, when they're interviewing itself, it is being digitalized. Like some use mobile to collect data, some use tablet to collect data, and also there are some tools which is up in the online in the web portal, and that data can be collected. Like for example, one such tool is SurveyMonkey, wherein we can upload our tool in an online platform through which data is collected. Or we can go for some application, mobile application or tablet application like Open Data Gate or Redcat, wherein in this application we can incorporate our tool, and this will be used for these are some of the various methods how a quantitative data can be captured. So when you're doing this electronically in the mobile or a tablet, it serves both the purposes: collect the data and also it stores the data. For quantitative, this is the data point where we are doing it, and for qualitative, transcription is the main data collection, which is nothing but usually a qualitative study will be done using two or three major, like using a video recording or an audio recording, or using a text-based version. So it's like, for example, if you're conducting an in-depth interview or focus group discussion, you will either record their audio or you can do a video recording with that audio. Or if both is not available, then you can start noting down the points, whatever discussion points is going on. So that is noting down the text. So these are the 3 ways you can do a data collection in a qualitative. So once the data is collected, that has to be that data collected in the audio or video form has to be transcribed. So the transcription plays a vital role in qualitative data collection. So either it can be an audio recording or a video recording. In the transcript, when a person is doing word by word transcription, they also need to emphasize on the certain words where the person is giving some emphasis there more, or a tone is raised, or tone is subtle, or whatever it is. So the tone, pause, or in a video recording, a body language also can be viewed, and that can also be documented. all this has to come in a transcription whenever a person is doing a transcription. So usually, 1 hour recording will take nearly 4 to 8 hours of transcription. Like for example, the person, if the audio is so clear and comfortable, and the person is well known, the transcriber knows the subject very well, then he might can finish within 4 hours maximum. But if that is not the case, then it can extend till 8 hours also. 1 hour. So we need to have a proper timeline set whenever you are committing to a timeline for this qualitative studies transcription. And also, if there is no scope of any of audio recording or video recording, then I said we need to go for a text-based data collection where a discussion points is noted with every single word. After that collection, immediately after the interview or a qualitative interview study done, you need to try to collect the from the interviewer or a facilitator the body language or any pause or any tone which is been set during the process of the interview, because that cannot be captured uh, because we are not doing audio or video. So those has to be immediately documented. If you miss to do it immediately, then they will not remember those things. So when you're documenting, you say on text based, you need to ensure that is done immediately. So this is the data collection for data entry for qualitative study. So next in the data processing is about the data quality check. In the data quality check, the quality check that is going to help us to ensure the data whichever is collected is a valid one, accurate one, and reliable and complete. It can be done at various level actually. When a data is collected, also the quality check will come automatically. When the entry is happening, also the data check will come. So some errors can be observed during the data collection time itself. Some can be observed during the entry time. Some can be done during the transcription time. You can understand this is there is an error or mistake in this place. So those has to be keep on the quality keep on improving or being checked at the various level throughout the process actually. So mainly for the qualitative data, the main thing you'll be looking at is missing data and accuracy of the data. Like in an interview, when a transcribing is going on, there can be some places some information can be missing, or some places there will be some irrelevant statement must have come. So if you see that in the transcript, whichever you receive, the reviewer should immediately go back to the interviewer or a facilitator or the transcriber, whoever has done, to ensure what is the problem. If you have an audio tape, the reviewer himself or herself can look into try to listen to the data and try to understand what it was being mentioned, so that the missing data can be fixed in qualitative. Also in qualitative, there is one better way to do the qualitative quality check is doing a complete transcription once again. Like after doing the transcription, the transcript is being kept and the audio is being listened, and the third person is listening the audio and checking the transcripts completely. So that is a proper way of a data quality check in the qualitative data once the transcript is done. But however, it's a time-consuming process, and mostly enough of many of the qualitative researchers are not doing it. They will go for a spot check rather. Like for example, they will pick out a paragraph and they will try to go through that particular track in that audio or a video and try to match how the quality of the transcription is. Based on that, they come to a consensus conclusion whether the transcription quality is good or how it is. Same wise, like for quantitative data, there also the main check which we used to do is the missing data and then implausible data. Missing data is nothing but mainly the reason might be either the interviewer must have missed to ask the question, or the data entry person must have missed to enter the data. It can be either one of this. In both the ways, what we need to do once we found a missing data in the data set, you need to refer back to the hard copy question wherever the data source is. The interview schedule, you need to check whether the data is there and there. If the data is there, at least then we need to try to correct it or update it, because we should not, the missing data will create an issue if there is a big, more data is missing. We will try to always bridge that gap. And if still the data is missing in the questionnaire also, Then we need to get back to the interviewer or the agency to try to understand what is the reason for question is being not asked or missed. So then we can understand the concept or the reason for it. So that can be used for during the analysis. So missing data and then implausible data is something like when you get the data itself, you will understand what is the range of this the variable which is entered. If, for example, you have done an interview for in a school and you have collected the data, and after that, when you're reviewing, you found the age is coming as a 45 or something like a 35. Then it's really very clear that is the age is out of range of anyone who is studying in the school. So that itself says it can be a issue in data entry, or it can be mainly it will be an error or some like it definitely it will be an error because or if there it can be some explanation also can be there. So or sometimes like for another example, if you take like for example your home outreach worker is visiting homes. So in a week, on an average 20 visits they are making. Suddenly, one particular instant, it is coming as some 100. Then definitely it is also out of range. Then again, we need to go back and we need to check. So these kind of checking for the impossible data also needed to be done and the gap has to be rectified. If this gap is lesser, then we will, that is not going to affect our any analysis. But if this gap is going to be more, then definitely it will affect the analysis. So we try to maximum, try to ensure there is no gap in the data. And lastly, in the data process, the last one is the data processing practice, which is nothing but computing the data further. Like for example, if you've done a national study and if you collected the data across the sites from different states, every state also must have compiled the data. But finally, nationally we need to compile one data set. So that is what data processing, and then that will be used for analyzing. Usually, whenever you collect the data for a health setup, you collect the height and weight, and you will not collect a BMI directly. It will be like BMI has to be computed. So using the weight and height, we will be computing the weight. So all this data processing is nothing but the like the step for computing. So usually, if you're doing this in a software, the software will have the provision to document the codings or the queries whichever is for data computation and processing. That has to be documented. Sorry. So that it will be helpful for anyone in the future reference how the calculation is being done. Even in Excel, there is a power query which helps us to understand the changes. You help anyone to look into the reference and can understand what I've done. But mostly, if you see many of the researchers or analysts, whoever is doing right now, they are not documenting this process, whatever they are doing in the data, because they are jumping directly. They have the data, they do the process without documenting and jumping to the analysis and interpretation. So any third party or anyone else is looking into the data, they will not understand what all calculations or computations. So ideally, one should do the documentation of this data processing. That's what I'm trying to highlight here. Okay. So now let's move on to quantitative data analysis. I think this session might drag some more time, I think, but I will try maximum to stick up to the time limit. And in this session, what they are trying to do is they are not trying to explain all the analysis. Only one statistical test has been explained in the module. I will also stick on to the same, but I will say the concept so that everyone can understand the concept and try to apply the same concept for the other test. Let's move to the quantitative data analysis. Usually, the quantitative data analysis, when it is done, it will be done in the two parts. One is the descriptive analysis, another is the inferential analysis. The descriptive analysis is the usual analysis, or that is the usual thing, whichever is visible for any presentation or anything. Whereas the inferential analysis comes as one small line or one small value tells whether it is statistically significant or not. So descriptive analysis it talks about usually talks about the frequencies, percentage or average about the what the data is for the data. And inferential analysis usually it's a uses some statistical test, and we do the testing of hypothesis or any explanation which is proposed, and about the and try to measure and take an inference out of that to give some conclusions. So that's what inferential analysis. So we'll dig down further about this inferential analysis. So if you take an example of this, whichever you can see right now, like you have a pre and post test, where in the pre the average score is 80 and in the post is 90. So what we can see, like as a descriptive, you can say before training the average score is 80%, and after the training the average score is 90%, and there is a difference of 10% before and after the training. So this is what the descriptive analysis says, and this is more useful for any decision to be made using the data. Whereas inferential analysis, how it comes is, we will go and try to test whether this is statistically significant or not. On average, test score before and after the training differed by 10%, which is raised by 10%. Because this difference is statistically significant, we conclude that the training is associated with the difference in the test score. We will try to test statistically, and we'll give a statement whether this is the training is associated with the score or not. That's what we're going to give the statement based upon the inferential analysis. That's what statistical test is going to say. So we will jump into statistical test, and we'll try to see how it can be integrated. Before going there, I'm just showing this table. I'm not going to explain everything because this is going to be one semester for one. It will go, statistical test itself will go as a one paper for one semester completely for any statistician studying in a degree college. But I'm sure most of you, whoever is attending this session, must have undergone or must have seen many of these tests during your college times also. Whenever you like some test you must have used also, some test you must have listened. This will be there definitely. So just like for example, chi-square test. I think many of you must have heard of seen this chi-square test, and then many of you must have used t-test, and some must have used ANOVA test, and some must have used some correlation test or regression. So these are the things which commonly used actually. But you might ask, what are these things which is there? So I think I will not explain it in detail, but I will say when we will be using this chi-square test, when we will be using this t-test, when we will be using ANOVA, and when we will be using this test. So just as a crux, I will tell you. So in a statistical test, we will always try to see what is the relationship between two variables, one dependent variable, one independent variable versus the dependent variable. What is the association, whether they are associated or not. So when the one variable, so for that we need to understand the type of the variable. So the type of the variable can be like simply three types. One is a continuous type, which will be talking about just a running number. Like for example, if you are documenting a date age, so you'll be punching in as a 8 years, 8 or 5 or 7, 6. So this is going to be called as a continuous data, wherein you are giving the exact value. If you're going to classify it into category, like age 0 to 10 years, 11 to 20 years, 21 to 30 years, then it is a categorical. So categorical data. It can be either a it will be an ordinal data actually. So it is a categorical or a continuous. In categorical, we can say categorical dichotomous. It means category with two category, anything with more than two category. That's it. So whatever I said here, so this is categorical data with two category. This is categorical data with more than two category. And this is continuous data. So if you are going to check here two category data with the continuous data, okay, you're going to check whether the mean age of male and female are statistically significant or not. Then you will go for a t-test. Okay, when age is going to be continuous and gender is going to be male and female, only two dichotomous. If if you are going to do the same age, you're going to try to understand the age with with a group of three group. Like for example, what do you say? Income group, like lower income, middle income, higher income. So three groups are there. With the three group, more than three category, okay, three category with the age continuous. Then it is called as, you will do an ANOVA test. If you have age and then you have like age category and a gender, like age 0 to 10 years, 10 to 20 years. So like that, if you have a category of age and gender, which is dichotomous, then it's a chi-square test. Same wise, if it is a more than two category with a one or two category, more than two categories, then again it's a chi-square test. So you should be very clear. When there is a two categorical data, it is a chi-square test. When it's a continuous with the two categorical data, it's a t-test. When it's a continuous with more than two categorical data, it's a ANOVA test. So these are the basic things which we will be doing. We should keep in our mind whenever we do a statistical test. And if our data is continuous, both dependent and independent, both are continuous variable, like income in numbers and age in numbers. If these two are the continuous variable, then the analysis we'll do is, you will do either a correlation or you will do a regression. So that is for the two continuous variable. So in module 9, we are going to see only t-test. I will be explaining only about t-test in detail. I'm not going to explain everything, but you just try to keep this slide and you try to think about whatever you studied previously in your college times. Then you can come out with you can understand what statistical test to be done when. Okay, so I'm not going to elaborate more. I think I am sure some must have got confused also, but listen to the module 9 completely. I think it will help us to understand everything clearly. So I'm not taking further more time, and I'm moving to the next slide, where I'm going to take an example in which we are to come up with a statistical significance. How to check the statistical? To check a statistical significance, or to do any statistical test, first we need a hypothesis. So a hypothesis which is called a null hypothesis, which we will say, like for example, in this example, when there is a pre-test and post-test, what we are trying to see? We are always trying to see there is no difference between ideally as per the thing, there should not be any difference. But what we are, as a researcher, what we are thinking, we wanted to see there should be some increase or a decrease in the pre and post. That's what we are thinking. But what ideal research, when we are putting a null hypothesis, there should be no difference with the null hypothesis. So we are going to check, we are going to test, statistical test we are going to conduct, which is going to help us to understand that which will be usually statistical test will be done as a p-value. So the probability value, by observing that value, we are trying to find there is no difference due to any chance or random error. So the change whichever is happened is like whether if it is whether by chance or because of an error, or it is because of any association or because of any factor. That's what we are trying to understand in statistical test. To explain it further, it's like statistical significance is observed as a result due to chance or due to the factor. Either it is due to chance it has happened, or it is due to some factor it has happened. So if it is happened due to the factor, then we will be saying that is statistical significance. If it is not, then it is like it is due to the chance. That's what we are trying to find it here. So statistical significance will tell us how confident we can feel the result we observed are reliable. Whatever the result is coming, the score which is coming, the pre-test score and post-test score, which is coming, whether it is a reliable one or not. That's what it is trying to give us. And also it is tell us how confident we can feel that the result we observed is a sample reflect, which is reflecting to the reality of the populations, which is helping us to understand the population also. Okay. So we look into this p-value, and or we sometimes we look into the confidence intervals also to determine whether whether there is a statistical significance or not. So to how we will look into the p-value. So the p-value, when you run a test, you will get a p-value, and we will try to see whether the p-value, whichever we are keep, whatever we used to say is, we will say it is a 0.05%, or we'll set it as a 0.05%. If the p-value is lesser than 0.05%, then we will reject our hypothesis, saying that there is a statistical significance, and this has not happened because of any chance. So there is a statistical significance. So we'll reject our null hypothesis, saying that there is no difference is getting rejected. Okay. So for that example, whichever is there, if our hypothesis is there is no difference between the average score before and after, and if our p-value comes as less than 0.05, then what is the interpretation is there is a less chance of less than a 5% chance that the percentage increase, whichever is 10% increase point difference, is caused due to the chance or error. So it is having a less than 0.05% chance. So what we do, we reject the hypothesis, because if it is less than 0.05, and we interpret saying that the training is associated with a statistically significant difference in pre and post test. So this is the common thing which we are going to use for any statistical test. You done a chi-square, you do a chi-square test, or you do a Wilcoxon test, or any test. Once you've done a test, and if the p-value is less than 0.05, then we reject the hypothesis, and we say there is an association between them. So that is what we are going to interpret based on the p-value. But there are sometimes they will go for the confidence interval also. Like rather than checking the p-value, some researchers, many of the researchers, look into the confidence interval. That will also come in the when you do the run at any test, the confidence interval will come. If the hypothesis value, whichever you are fixing, like our hypothesis value is 0 now, if that is included in the confidence interval, so, like if it is like, if we will reject the hypothesis, if the confidence interval does not include in the value of our hypothesis. Our value of our hypothesis is 0. If that is not included, then we will again reject the our hypothesis, null hypothesis, and we'll accept and we'll say there is an relation, there is an association between the two variables. So that is the usually the way we will test, give the statistical test significance for any two variables. Before getting into the t-test, in module 9, they were emphasizing one main thing, which we all need to keep in mind, because there are some times you will find the statistical test will be significant. Based on your statistical test, there will be a significance. However, programmatically, that can be meaningless also. If I assume example, in this example, wherever they are saying, okay, the BB, when they are trying to check the BB, like if there is a 5% scale decrease, it doesn't, it can be statistically significant by doing that statistical test. But still, the physicians or doctors are not going to consider 5-point difference is a good one. They will always think of 10 to more than 10 as a good one for a decrease. So you should always keep in sense. Statistically, it can be significant, but programmatically, whether it is fine or not, that has to be looked in before interpreting anything in the findings. So that we should always keep in mind. Another thing which I want to highlight before going to qualitative analysis is the language which we are presenting in when once you've done the test. Usually, the statistical significance can tell whether the observed difference is due to chance, but the significant testing not alone tell us whether the observed difference is caused by our factor or interest. So you cannot say this our factor is the one which is caused the distance. You can say only there is an association. You cannot say there is a cause. This is the one which caused this improvement. Like there's a difference. The training is associated with the difference in test score versus the training led to increase in the test score. So without testing the whether the training is the main contributor, you cannot give the second statement. For doing the second statement, you need to do some other statistical testing like regression or some predictive analysis has to be done to give any statement like the training led to the increase or anything. Only with the statistical test, the t-test or whatever we discuss, you can say there is an association only. You cannot say this has led to this. So that cannot be done. So that we should be very clear. And we should not use any generalized statement saying that this caused this. As a, like that, we cannot give any statements. You should say only there is an association when you do a simple statistical test. So that we need to keep in our mind. So now I'll take few minutes to explain about the t-test, which is the basic test which will be conducted. I can make it as interactive, but I don't think usually whenever a facilitator or a coordinator ask any question, none of you respond. So I will also not ask any question. I'll move forward only. When we do a t-test, when the t-test will be done when there is a continuous variable as a dependent, and we have an independent variable as a either a dichotomous category, only two category. Okay, more than two category, then we will not go for a t-test. So we should remember that. So in the t-test, we are having three types of t-test. One is one sample t-test. When when we do a one sample t-test is when a mean of group one is checked with a target value with every single value, then it is called one sample t-test. You take a mean of a group and test that with every single individual and come out with a p-value, then it's called a one sample t-test. If you take a mean of one group with another mean of a second group, and if you are trying to test it, then it is called as a two sample t-test. The third one is a paired t-test. Paired t-test will be done when you are having a one group. In that group, if you are having a one score before and after another score, when there is a pre and post for the same group, then we will go for a paired t-test. So our example, whichever we have discussed, we are talking mainly about the paired t-test. And in the module 9, they have given one exercise or an activity, simple activity to do an analysis using an Excel sheet. So that you can also practice it. Simple thing you need to remember is Excel will not, by default, it will not have that analysis add-in. What you need to do, you need to go to the options in the Excel and you need to go to the add-in. Add-in, you need to go and you need to add an analysis toolkit. If you add that analysis toolkit, then you can do a simple test like t-test or ANOVA test. All these tests also can be done in the Excel also. So this particular example is an output for a paired to t-test and paired t-test. So whenever you're doing a paired t-test, it will give the pre-score average mean. Here is the pre-score and here is the post-score. So you can talk it in terms of percentage also, 50.6%, 83.8%. So there is an increase in pre and post. And the p-value is nothing but this is the p-value. This is the p-value. Which one to see, one tail or two tail? Usually we look into two tail p-value because we keep our null hypothesis as there is no difference. It can go, it can increase also, it can decrease also. It can go in both the directions. So it is not having any direction. So we will say we will consider two tail. If we say it can go only in one direction, it can only increase, it cannot decrease, then we will check the p-value for one tail. Okay, so that is the difference. Usually we will check the two tail only. So in our example, we like our hypothesis says no difference. So it can go up or it can go down. It is no direction. So we will go for the p-value of two tail. So here the value comes is 5.99 into e power 06. I think people can read this. I think if someone have any issues in reading this, I'll just put it in chat. What it will come. So it will come as a anyone knows also, you can also type in the chat. So it is the 5.99 e minus 06. What it means is it is nothing but 0. E minus 06 is nothing but dot and 5 times 0 and then the value which is coming in there. This is what is the value. So which is definitely less than 0.05. So we reject the null hypothesis and we accept we say there is a significant difference between pre and post training. The training is associated with statistically with a significance difference in pre and post scores. So that's what the interpretation. I went to the chat box and I'm going back. So, shall we move to the qualitative analysis? Sweta, at least you say yes. We can.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so let's go to the qualitative analysis. So I'm not, I think I've taken more than 40 minutes for this. Left with 20 minutes. I'll try to, qualitative analysis will not drag much because it's going to talk about the codings and text and other things. We will not having any conclusions most probably. So in the qualitative analysis, we are going to look into the thematic analysis mainly, which is a method of systematically identifying, organizing, and offering insight into the patterns of meanings or themes of the data set, which will come with the themes of. So usually, this qualitative analysis is nothing but a iterative process. It has to be done continuously. It can be done many times repeatedly. Like it is not like once you're done it and you're done forever. It has to be done more than one time. Repeatedly, you have to do it. That's when the qualitative analysis data will be improvised or improved. So you need to read, you need to further reduce the script and make it organized. You code and you need to interpret, and you need to come to some conclusion which you're going to give it as a qualitative finding. So how we do the thematic analysis? So these are the steps which is there in the thematic analysis. So first, what you need to do is you need to familiarize yourself with the data. So in qualitative data, what is the familiarizing? It means you need to keep reading the entire script or the transcribed document completely, and you need to get into the document. Otherwise, you will not be able to bring the interpretation of it. If anyone who is overlooking the document and trying to give a qualitative analysis, then that is not going to make any sense, because a qualitative analysis has to be done by a person who understands the entire transcription or whatever the data collected completely. If he or she understands it completely, then only they can do the analysis of qualitative studies. So first they need to familiarize themselves with the data which are collected by reading it repeatedly and understanding it. Then they need to start coding the data. So coding the data means they need to come up with some codes for like I will explain the codes further. Before that, I can tell you how we can do the qualitative analysis. There are some softwares available for doing qualitative analysis, like STI and BIO. But I've seen many times the qualitative analysis is done using a hand coding only, rather getting into the qualitative softwares. The main reason is many of you, like, it is ideally wise to get into the qualitative analysis software when you have a data collected. Like if you have nearly 50 or 100 transcripts which needed to be analyzed, if you have multiple data collected and that needed to be analyzed, then you can get into a software which helps you to go and get the theme out of it. If you have a qualitative study which is done for some 10 interviews, some 5 focus group discussions, something like that, then ideally it's better to do it manually rather going into a software. So that's how practically we are doing nowadays. Just but if you are an expert who is good in qualitative software, then even for a less number of samples you can get into it. But just my perception, I'm just giving you. So in hand coding, how it will work is it is just by shading out, like you pick a code and you shade out saying this depend to this line goes to this code. So you just keep shading and assign the code for the shaded place. So that will help us to finally analyze. Okay, but in softwares, the software itself will come out. You first you need to assign the codes and define a code. Then you again, whatever you did manually there in an Excel, in a Word document, you will do it in a software. But here the software will help you to easily code by, because you will be, instead of shading, you will just go and select it and you will say this is this code one, this is this code two. Like that, you need to keep on giving the coding. And the software will help you finally to combine and take out like different codes, whatever the like one code one, what are the themes, what are the points came in that code, what are the quotations come out of this code. Like that, you can easily pull out and you can start analyzing and interpreting. So to come out for that, first, the usual thing which you need to do is you need to come up with a code book. The code book will contain something like this. What is the code name? That, like for example, you can see this example, like barriers, no training, this is training like that, and you explain what this barriers, no training means what, and give some example also. So this, if you have something like this list of codes in one document, then that is called as a code book. So you keep it listed so that you can use it. You can like you can see this and you can start coding the entire document or documents, and easily you can come out of it. So the code book helps to like so the same code, it will help you to be more consistent, and it will be like a living document which is like sometimes the code book keeps on changing, it's completely evolved. Like in the beginning you must have given some coding name, but at the end of the document, you might come with the same coding name can be changed to something else, and the first coding might have gone completely no use. So anything that is the way it will be keep on evolving based on the need. So that's what the certain codes become less relevant also over the period of time. But one thing we need to remember, like when a person is doing the qualitative analysis for the first time or initial periods, they will tend to get more excited and they will start coding everything in the document. Okay, but yes, of course, everything makes sense, but we need to keep our objective, our research question, our tools and program theory in our mind, and then we need to do the coding. Otherwise, we will end up in a mess without any direction. So we should always keep these 4 documents in front of us when we are doing this coding, so that we are more focused and we are getting out like whatever things which is needed for us to come out with our findings. So that we should always keep in our mind. So there are some tips given in the module 9 regarding coding. One is like dual coder approach, like two coders, multiple coders are doing the coding and then finally comparing and bringing out a final output. Or there is some concept where blind coding, one person doing a coding, another person also will be doing the same data. document the coding. And then these two codes will be checked and then come to a final consensus. Or there is a third method where there is like they will one person code and send that code to another coder review. Then wherever the disagreement comes, then they come to a consensus and then they'll sort it out. If they both couldn't come into any consensus, then the third evaluator come and then the final one. So in doing this code, definitely 1 hour interview is going to take more than multiplies 1 times or 2 times it will take to do a coding. If you are clear with your interview completely, you study your interview. So thus the coding plays an important role in a qualitative analysis actually. And then we need to start initial the themes. You need to generate initials and themes out of these codes. For example, for this example, hand hygiene example, we can build up themes like training, mentoring, team meetings, posters have different themes, and you can start codes under these things. And then we can review the themes again. We can further refine it, and then come out with the findings. So whenever they are doing this, the teams should be organized around the core idea or a concept that holds the entire all the other teams together. So it should hold all the teams together so that a proper story will come out of it. So that's the thing which we need to come out. Finally, a proper story should come out of it as a binding of the entire qualitative analysis. So that's how the qualitative analysis is being done and comes out as an outcome. So before going to the findings part and the dissemination, I just wanted to highlight on the mixed method design, which is not discussed so far in the module, which is very vital. Like usually, many of the researchers will go for a mixed method design because that is more powerful approach for any program like quantitative and qualitative together as a one as a design so that it can come out very well. So in the mixed method, there are three different types. One is explanatory, exploratory, and then there is a convergent type. So usually the explanatory is like you do a quantitative study, and after doing the quantitative, you pick up the some samples, and then you do a qualitative further, an in-depth interview or anything to explain whatever quantitative finding is giving. So the qualitative data will explain whatever quantitative finding has come out with. Same wise, the exploratory sequence is other way around. You do a qualitative study first, then come up with a quantitative study tool, and then do the quantitative study. So it's mostly using for the survey, they do the same. So the qualitative data collected explore the phenomenon, then quantitative data access to extend the qualitative phenomenon applying to the population so that you can come out with a final outcome. Do a qualitative and then do a quantitative based on the qualitative, whatever you think came out. And there is another method which is a convergent design in which both the things is done simultaneously. Quantitative studies done separately by another one team and qualitative by another team. And finally compare and both will support each other and do a triangulation and give a finding. But there is one more method also is there in the mixed method, which broadly used. Like for example, they do a exploratory first and then do an explanatory and finish the study. Like they do some FGD and come up with a like exploratory FGD they will conduct and come up with some tools and do a quantitative study, and then they will do the exploratory. Then they do a in-depth interview like a FGD qualitative study and then a quantitative study, a survey, and then in-depth interview at the last, again a qualitative study. So exploratory and explanatory can be done also together in the mixed model. So these are some of the ways the studies like a research or a evaluation study can be taken. So we are at the last session for the module 9, in which we are going to see only about the validating and disseminating the qualitative findings, because quantitative findings while dissemination are things we have seen in the previous modules, how we can present in the form of a graph, in the form of this, that, all that we have seen in detail. So we are going to focus only about the qualitative findings. So usually for validating qualitative findings, usually the like main thing is to share the findings with the program team, whoever worked in that program, and then stakeholders, whoever other stakeholders in the program, and to get their input on the validity and accuracy of these findings. So that will help us to further improvise and validate the findings. And getting a stakeholders' input on the insight and then in the context and also about any other alternative interpretation of the finding. This will help us to validate the qualitative findings, whichever is coming. And for dissemination of qualitative. So for disseminating a qualitative finding, we need to keep something in our mind, meaning some major points in our mind, which is listed here. Like for quantitative finding dissemination, we use graphs and tables, and we present it as a quantitative findings presentation in the dissemination. Whereas for qualitative, usually what we do is we use quotations, quotes, saying that this has been said by this person like this, and we pull out the exact quote and we'll give it. So how it goes is we need to be more like actually, as I said before, we need to keep our story focused on the evaluation question. We should not move out of our evaluation question, even though there might be some insights coming out of as an output of qualitative study, but still we will focus on our evaluation question because that has to be spelled out. And we use as many as quotations in the findings. And we should use the quotation from different people, not only one person. Like, for example, you do a qualitative study, you did an in-depth interview of 10 people, and you are quoting about only one person continuously means that doesn't make sense. You should pull quotes from different people. Out of the 10, at least from 5 to 6 people, various quotations has to be given. That will help the listeners or the people who's listening will understand it further more better. And the main thing which has been spelled is don't quantify your qualitative finding. Like for example, we always, it's a usual thing which many of the researchers are doing right now. Not researchers, I'm saying many of the people who have done a qualitative study end up saying 10% of the people has said like this, 20% of the people has said like this, has feeling like this. So you are quantifying the qualitative. That should not be done in a qualitative findings at all, because that is not your purpose. Your purpose is to get something in depth. So you need to give more specific and qualitative information as a quotes rather than quantifying it actually. And the last one, as a qualitative finding designation, you need to keep in your mind is the presenter or the person who is finally presenting or the team who is interpreted or giving the feedback has to tell about their position or their stand very clearly. Like if you are an activist into one particular program and you are going to disseminate about it, you need to spell out that you are your profile very well to the audience, because then they will understand if there is any bias also inside when you are presenting comes out, they will understand you because of your position as a person, as an activist, you are the way you are presenting. So that has to be spelled out to everyone so that everyone will be clear with what you are trying to interpret or what you are trying to say. So we should all keep this in mind when you're doing the qualitative finding designation. So as per the module 9, I had only all this to be explained. So I stick on to whatever has been said in the module 9. I'm not moved out of this topic other than the statistical test, whichever is needed. I would say all the participants, the module 9, the entire video, whichever is there, it's very, very comfortable and easy to understand. You try to listen it, and I think you will get more clarity. Further more clarity, whatever I explain must be more clear when you are listening to that audio and video visuals, whichever is available in the webinar. So please try to check in that sessions and you can understand it. Other than that, we have the assignment, one assignment and one quiz. In the assignment, they are given a data of test, pre-test and post-test score, and whether the answer given is correct or no, false. If it's true, they're given 1, or false, it's they are given 0, I think. So they are given like that, and they have asked you to interpret. So for the quantitative data, and they are also given a qualitative also. For that also you need to give. So you need to do quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis and answer all these 4 parts for your assignment. And quiz, I think it's usual, as you know very well about your quiz. That's what I highlight about the analysis. So I think I'm done with this. It's 1 hour right now. So anyone wants to say anything, you can put in your chat box, or if there is no questions, then we can wind up the session.
If anybody has any questions, you can ask the questions. We can wait for 5 minutes.
And I'm sure the session is little must have made some people confused also. So I am repeatedly saying, you just look into the webinar, you look into the sessions inside our assignment modules. So you will understand it very well, whatever I explain now.
So I don't think there are any questions. Thank you for the session.
And thank you, Sweta. Thanks you. I felt it's good to do this session because it's always my my theme of my area of interest.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll end the session now. Thank you, everybody.